My name is Joseph Wunderlich. I'm a professor of engineering, architecture, and computer science. I was born in 1961. I did mostly architecture until age 30, and then I've done a mix of computer engineering and architecture since then. This lecture is on mansions and how they influence more modest architecture. All the photographs are by me unless noted otherwise. First, we will reference mansions and castles in this book, Buildings Across Time, 4th edition. Then we'll look at local mansion examples in the Philadelphia region, and then one personal design in Lancaster County inspired by mansions. Firstly, we will look at Asia, and specifically China and Japan. So we see in China from the 6th century, very early on, interior freedom and plan. We'll see that later in Japanese designs and then Frank Lloyd Wright designs. Timber post and beam with complex decorative joinery, very detailed woodworking. Buildings around a central courtyard. We'll see that as a theme in a number of cultures dating back from long ago. Here we see an axial arrangement, somewhat symmetrical, with some order of establishing a dominance in the architectural details. Building placement according to Confucian ideals, Confucius and the Taoist religion, Confucianism, and Feng Shui is an extension of Taoism principles. And understanding sun angles, wind, and microclimates from early on. So we think of that as something recent, and Frank Lloyd Wright and lead design. But we'll see this, the Chinese were doing this, the Romans had sun rights and worried about sun angles 2,000 years ago, as well as the Chinese. So it's not something new. The passive solar design versus active with the technology and equipment and machines and advanced engineering is that's new, the active heating and cooling, but passive stems back to long ago. People understood the sun and the environment. So Japan now, this is later, and Japan is very much a completely different culture and society from China, although it has early influences from China. So this is in Kyoto, the original capital of Japan, and where there's many historic sites preserved. Spent a couple weeks there. It's the best place to go if you want to see historical Japanese architecture. So some generalizations about Japan from the book, Building Across Time. So towns, both in the countryside and other places. Towns row houses with shops along streets, wood posts on stone foundations, plank-covered gabled roofs, lightweight screening, adds to the open floor plan and the inside-outside flow. Street level window above eye level for privacy. Frank Lloyd Wright would do that quite a bit also. Small gardens behind the house, integrating the inside and outside. The Ingawa is one type of architecture we look at in later courses. In countryside, the Minka is a wood folk house. May shelter animals and people together. Dirt floors, wood platforms. Thatched roofs is one way to tell that what you're looking at. Bamboo, wood shingles, tatami. This is a unit system based on the tatami means a floor mat, and it's a certain dimension, fixed dimension, and then you make all the rooms multiples of that tatami in different directions. So now simplicity, artistry, and attention to detail, inspiring Frank Lloyd Wright. So I'm recording this now in 2020. I originally made this lecture in 2011, but I have a whole lecture series on Frank Lloyd Wright now with lots of references to Japanese architecture throughout his life. He visited the 1893 Chicago World's Fair and saw a Japanese architecture exhibit there, a reconstructed building or a facsimile of a building from Kyoto, and then visited in 1906 and 1913, and then over a 5-year span leading up to 1923, lived for 3 years in Japan. Now, also architecture reflects Japanese qualities of composure and repose, a state of rest, sleep, and tranquility. So there's a real mind, body, spirit thing that you can be inspired by through Japanese culture and arts and architecture. So Japan, to maybe oversimplify a rich culture, but I think they might agree that they push the high-tech envelope in so many ways, but they're also very traditional. And so you'll see in Kyoto, for example, 60 preserved sites, and each site has many buildings. The old town is one site. Buddhist temple could have a dozen buildings in it, and that's one site. There's 60 of them in Kyoto. And you don't, and not just Kyoto, but other places too. Even Narita, we flew in, the airport city. You would think it's an airport city, that's going to be somewhat industrialized. But it's beautiful Japanese gardens and some historic architecture. And then you see in the center, center slide here of the bullet train. The bullet trains come every 10 minutes into Tokyo to the exact second, and then they go up to 200 miles an hour. And then a third aspect, tradition plus high tech plus group harmony, wa in Japanese, is a very important concept in Japan. So I'm going to switch to Europe. This is a big overview. I have other lectures and courses that go much into detail in both Asian, specifically Japanese architecture, a whole lecture series on that, a whole lecture just on Japanese architecture, and then a couple just on Italian also. So the Roman atrium, this is out of the book, Buildings Across Time. Roman atrium house. So this is not a new concept, having an atrium. You see it in China and Roman times. These are ancient civilizations. More recently in Italy, and you see this design that's very often referenced because of its symmetry. And you can see the symmetry here in this model. What that looks like, a cross-section of the building. Now a little bit of some pictures that I took in Italy on one of my trips. I've been to Italy 6 times now, taught in Italy, the University of Trento. I have a relationship with 6 different universities, but mostly with the University of Trento and Trentino Alta, and also the Pantheon Institute with Architecture in Rome. So now this is Venice. And Venice and Padua are part of one of the same regions of Italy that are a separate culture in themselves, a subculture within Italy. So Padova, is the Basilica of St. Anthony. Right in the beginning of the end of the medieval times. Oh, this is my friend down the corner here is Mario DeCecco, is professor of engineering at the University of Trento, a good friend now. I'm talking to his wife in the background there. She's a professor of medicine, a doctor of infectious diseases at the University of Padua, where Mario is also a part-time professor there, but full-time professor at the University of Trento. And that's his mother right next to him, giving him some instructions. Germany now, we're surveying Europe very quickly here. So this is a famous castle in Germany. Another famous one, I believe this one inspired the Disney castles. Again, we're quickly surveying Europe now. This is Windsor Castle and England, the House of Windsor. Elizabeth Windsor is the Queen of England. So we visited there, dressed up a little bit. See my son dressed up also. They appreciated that. All the people that worked there appreciated dressing up for the Queen. We didn't get to see her, but just to honor the tradition. Now to America, Monticello. Thomas Jefferson designed this home, as well as the University of Virginia. He lived in France for a while. This is a neoclassical design. influenced by the Pantheon in Rome. You see his home, the symmetry of that, the order, the neoclassicism. Neoclassic normally refers to Greek and Roman influence. This is a Roman influence. Here is the Pantheon Institute on the right, almost 2,000 years old, and a couple hundred years ago, Thomas Jefferson's house. So now some local examples. The Philadelphia Main Line, country estates west of the city, accessed by the main line of railroad tracks. There's 4 tracks coming out of the city. So the Philadelphia Main Line extends from Overbrook, right outside of Philadelphia, out to Paoli. It does extend a little further now, but traditionally, originally, Paoli was the last stop in the Philadelphia Main Line. So these 4 sets of tracks come out from Philadelphia to Paoli. Now, the Amtrak line actually extends much further out, and I believe there was a spur early on that came out this way. But the main 4 tracks were mainly out to Paoli, and where all the mansions were built from the wealth of that time. So now zoom in a little closer and see Overbrook to Paoli. Take a look at some of the stations. This is Overbrook. Then Marion. There's Marion Station. Narberth Station. Some of these original designs don't exist anymore, so I found images from the past. Wynwood Station. Ardmore Station. Ardmore is a very built up town now, so it's a brand new station. Haverford. This is still pretty much original. Now in Haverford, so we zoom in a little bit or expand out from the station, and we'll see some of these repurposed mansions. This particular one in Haverford is repurposed as retirement housing. You see my son down the corner in that picture. This is also in Haverford. I had a family residence like this. My grandfather had a couple businesses, and a long story there. This house actually got torn down. One looked just like this right next door was the house that we go to for all of our Christmases and Thanksgivings. His wife was from Oklahoma, and he grew up in Boston, and turn of the century in the 1900, and started some businesses, made some money, and so had a nice home. So now Bryn Mawr Station. Now also in Bryn Mawr, you see this Tudor style. There's another mansion that is Sacred Heart Academy. There's lots of private schools in the area that use the mansions. Nobody really can afford, very rarely somebody can afford the taxes alone on these estates. So they get donated or part of a foundation, or somehow become schools or other reuses. There's my son in the front of that building. This is St. Aloysius Academy. I went to Holy Child Academy down the road, and we would play at St. Aloysius all the time in sports. My son on the porch there. There's my son standing on the wall. We probably shouldn't have done that. I asked him to do that, and then some guy yelled out the window, the caretaker, and we all ran away. Both of us did. This is in Bryn Mawr. There was a wedding going on in here next to Blessed John Newman Church, where we typically would go to church before going to my grandfather's house that I showed you in the previous picture. The church is right next to this, so we're just walking around. There was a wedding going in here. So my son walked through there. I asked him to just take some pictures. can't really see the wedding going on. This is Bryn Mawr. Bryn Mawr, an old estate, an old mansion preserved. And this particular mansion is in the center of a new surrounding condominium complex. Presumably the developer bought this land with the estate and then built all of the buildings, condominiums nearby, and used this as an inspiration. And so you can see now this looks similar, but not the detail. Some of the architectures are not as nice as it could be. You can see the differences here. Putting shutters on this type of Italian villa design is not quite appropriate. The shutters on the left there are more of a colonial kind of thing to do. And the eaves, the overhangs are really not like they should be if you're really going to honor the details, the vernacular of this architectural style. But, it's perhaps close enough. At least it's a better try than a lot of developers will do. And you can get a feel for you're in this the estate. This is just a gatehouse now of a mansion that got torn down in Bryn Mawr. So you can imagine the grandeur of the main building. So a gatehouse, presumably somebody lives here just to man the gate, or used to. Now it's a separate home somebody lives in. Again, we're looking for inspirations from the past. Very rarely does anybody have enough wealth now to own one of these estates. I mean, this is from a long gone era. So Rosemont now, this is where I went to grade school. We would take the train from Stratford here when I was a little older. Not quite original state of design. And now here's the school that I went to next to Rosemont College, Rosemont School of the Holy Child. It's was changed its name to Rosemont or Holy Child Academy. I don't know if it changed back, but I'm sure what it was when I was there. And so now we'll take a look at that. So this mansion, and we'd have art classes in here, drawing and painting, and it was inspiring. Now there's a main building near adjoining it that's not of this detail or grandeur. But I remember sitting and actually sketching this building from the outside, learning a little bit about perspective drawing when I was 10, 11 years old, 12 years old. And so, you use you repurpose the mansion and you try to not make the new building look too much out of context. Now, some of this was built in the 70s, so, the architecture wasn't, the newer stuff wasn't quite a compliment. But nevertheless, this is, a recent photo. I've gone back, took my son to visit, and this inspiration, it still exists. So yeah, this is permanently burned into my mind and influences things that I've done later on in a number of ways, not just architecturally. It's grade school, formative years. So now Rosemont College is right next door. There's the students actually come over and use us as guinea pigs for sociology and psychology experiments. It's kind of fun. It's a little weird at times. Now Villanova. Not much of a station. This is a church where my parents were married in 1960. My dad's funeral was there in 2009. My dad taught physics here as a professor. My mom went here, got a chemistry degree. Lots of family members done things. Villanova University. Then here's another repurposed mansion in Villanova. My mother was the head of all the math and science, taught AP and honors, chemistry, physics, calculus. My dad actually taught here for a number of years too. And so my mother retired, I think, after 30 years there teaching. Repurposed mansion. Radnor Station, St. David's Station. Now, St. David's, let's take a look at another college, or a couple colleges here, Cabrini College and Eastern University. So this is right near my house. I grew up just to the left over there. My very first job ever when I was 13 was I was a caddy, carrying golf bags on the St. David's golf course. It was hard work. To carry 2 golf bags for 3 to 4 hours in the hot sun. I got $10 tip, which I guess was good at the time, but still, hard work. Cabrini College. Take a zoom in to take a look at this. So Cabrini College has stables. Now, these are huge estates. You imagine the wealth here. These are stables, a huge building of many horses, just stables. Then the college mansion itself, and then the gatehouse. Let's see down below here. Take a look at all those. So now let's zoom in to the mansion itself. Maybe look for some inspirations. So just the mansion. Zoom in. Now this house was designed by Horace Trumbauer, pretty famous in the Philadelphia area, in the Philadelphia main line, number of mansions, also the Philadelphia Art Museum. And you see here an Elizabethan Tudor style with certain features. And we'll speak about the window, the cascade of window, the banding of windows. Now, in other lectures, I have a lecture series on Frank Lloyd Wright. I speak about banding of windows. And you can't really say that this architect was influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright or vice versa, because they were both of the same era. Horace Trumbull was born in 1868, Frank Lloyd Wright in 1867. And this design by Trumbauer was in 1907, and Frank Lloyd Wright was at that time in the midst of taking off with his prairie-style homes. He had already done some banding of windows earlier, but it wouldn't be fair to say that Trumbauer imitated Frank Lloyd Wright in any way, or was even really aware of Frank Lloyd Wright, really. And this idea of putting windows in cascades like this is not really that new of a thing to do. You can see this in Tudor styles and in England, and dating back, before both of these architects. So this is now Cabrini College repurposed mansion. So what we want to do is be inspired by something grand and then scale down to reality to make it feasible. But be loyal to the style, quality, and details as much as possible. Conform to the environment, the terrain, the trees, the climate, the architectural vernacular. So let's look at the site planning and landscape architecture. House placed high on the highest elevation. And that's a grand thing to do, like a castle. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright would say that would destroy the hill, and he was more of an organic architect. He coined, organic architecture and design had existed in different forms before him, but he certainly established a set of rules and over 500 designs that were built, of 1,000 designs that he had. And so, this is in this particular design, placing it on a hill, not something Frank Lloyd Wright would have done. Cabrini College, again, same house. This is my mother and my daughter. She's actually just turned 18 and she's going to college now. I think she's maybe 3 in this picture. Terraced garden. This stone wall really adds something to the landscape. My daughter with her little blanket. I can't believe it. She's turned 18. This is 15 years ago. I remember when I first put this lecture together. Well, I put 2011. It may have actually been earlier. I had a hard time remembering exactly what date. Could have been earlier. So now let's look at some specific details. So look at the pavers now, the brick pavers. Brick pavers. So that's not a very expensive thing to do. It's not super cheap, but it's not exorbitant. That's something could do in future designs. What about the walled courtyard? Well, that could get a little costly doing that kind of stone masonry all around like that. But it doesn't have to be out of stone. It looks much better if it is. A portico for the garage, horse and buggy first, and then a car come under here and have shelter as people get out, go into the building. So the portico. You think about that and how that adds to the building. Maybe specify that as a unique part of your design. Portico. The roof gables and dormers. The gable ends here. Now I'll show you a design of my own where I extend the gables out in a similar fashion, not exactly, but extending the gable ends out to get some eaves and some soffit there and some reveal is much nicer than just cutting them flat, making them flush, which people typically do with trusses nowadays for ease of cost and construction, but at a cost of the architectural quality. So dormers. Little gateway, and wall, arch. Not a simple thing to do in stone masonry. It'd be hard to find somebody nowadays to actually have the skills to do this. So now the porch, let's look at the porch. So the porch is coming off. This is one of a couple porches. There's another porch. This one's enclosed, also has a nice balcony up above. Well, this is something we'll talk about in other courses too, about an enclosed porch, a veranda, the Japanese ngawa, opening the inside to the outside, being able to feel like you're outside while you're inside, and it's kind of becoming one with nature. We'll see this in a number of other places in other courses. So again, the enclosed porch, and my mom and daughter. Again, my mom and daughter. My mom's turning 91 in a couple days as I record this. She's still going strong as part of the university, Villanova University's Senate, President of the Alumni Association, until she was in her late 80s. Came guest lectured at Elizabethtown College 10 years ago. And so Cabrini College, banks of windows. Franklin Wright is often credited with doing this banding of windows, but you see this in other people's designs from early on. banks of windows. These windows look like this on the corner because there's a stairwell in there. This is an example of the interior space and the way it works, dictating the exterior skin. So you can see that these windows are following a stairwell. So zooming back out again, looking at the whole estate. And then now let's take a closer look at the stables. This structure is just for horses and the servants at the time that tended to the horses. So this is certainly extreme. Zoom back out again. Look at the gatehouse. So now here is an important example of a scaled down version of what you see in the architecture of the grand estate, but in a cost-effective way. I mean, this is a home that you could make today and make affordable. Here's a nearby home. So you see the influence. This is outside the college, but you presumably could see the influence here. Now this picture makes it a little more evident that clearly, I think, some influenced by the nearby estate. It's all St. David's still. So still in St. David's now. You see the train station in the bottom there we looked at earlier, and we just looked at Cabrini College up above the top part. So now let's look at Eastern University. Zoom in on that. So Eastern University is right next to Cabrini College, both of them near my childhood home. This is in St. David's. I grew up in Stratford. Wayne is actually in between as a train station, but Stratford, Wayne are kind of one thing, one post office. And so this was in walking distance of my childhood home. And this is by David Knickerbocker Boyd, also the same era with Horace Trumbauer and Frank Lloyd Wright out in the Midwest. Not that they collaborated in any way, although Knickerbocker did work with Trumbauer in Philadelphia. This is the Philadelphia Main Line. And so this is a Spanish-style villa-inspired design for the Walmarthen family. Walmarthens would frequently vacation in California, and they wanted something with a Spanish villa look to it. This is a picture I took in Portofino, Italy in 2004. Now this is of the same period as the Spanish villas. It's in a different country, but not too far away, and I believe there's some similar architectural features you'll see here. And at this time, I was designing my own Pennsylvania home, and I debated putting in a tower, and so I was taking pictures of towers in Italy. And then this slide, you see the Spanish-influenced villa comparing to the Italian villas of the same period. Or I say, a Spanish villa, but this is actually Eastern University, influenced by Spanish villas. So now we move on to Wayne. Not my favorite. Next after Wayne Station is Stratford Station, and this is where I grew up from 3 years old till I went away to college. My mother still lives here. And so this is made in 1876. It was actually made in Wayne and then moved here. The architect is not on record. It's a Victorian era stick style, if you wanted to look into that. And this building was added to the National Registry of Historic Places in 1984. And you see a picture of my daughter and my son in one picture going to visit Grandma. And now Devon, this is what it used to look like. Doesn't exist anymore. The new buildings, not much to describe. Well, actually, for a while, this did exist like this when I was younger. This is a nearby repurposed mansion in Devon Prep. Almost went there. Decided to go to public school because there was a girl I liked. I thought she was going to go to my public school, ended up going to a different school. That's a story for another time. I might have gone a different route. Maybe not. If I had gone through here, this was in walking distance to my house, my parents' house. So be inspired by something grand. Scale down to reality, but be loyal to style, quality, and details. I'm repeating myself, but it's important. Conform to environment. Trees, terrain, trees, climate, architectural vernacular. So here's a little house, very affordable. Well, I mean, land values are expensive now in this area, but the building itself, this is an affordable thing. The stone masonry is a little expensive, but not that much, considering the quality it adds, and arguably influenced by the repurposed mansion for the Devon Prep School right next door. Now Berwyn, there's Berwyn, Dalesford, and lastly Paoli. The new station doesn't look anything like this. They're actually redoing this whole area with but there's a whole history here. They built up the dirt on either side, put a bridge across, made it somewhat of a narrow trench that the train was down in, but now they've knocked out that bridge and they've done a number of things. So now here's the YMCA I used to go to summer camps at, and this is in Paoli. And so this is a French style now, French chateau. So you can see the difference here between the other styles. French. Now I'm not sure if this is one of the original buildings or just a pretty well done facsimile to the style of the older building, with the exception of these shed type porticos coming off of either side. They don't seem very much period. This could have been a restored version of the older building, although the brick looks newer. However, the dormers look very much original. So I imagine this probably was one of the original buildings and then was renovated. Maybe they repointed the brick and then definitely stuck on the shed roofs over the doorways, which are out of context to the period in the vernacular. I believe this is the original carriage house. It looks to be that. Horse and buggies mostly in the beginning. Although cars did exist at that time, but not many. Again, the main building. Now, part of being an architect is to participate and present in crits. And so you need to be open to some criticism, and so I don't mind giving some here. This on the left is, in my opinion, a not very well done addition. You can see it's not seamless in any way. They've put it a mansard roof, which is a French thing that you see in Paris and on taller buildings. It's, you know, a 3-4 story apartment kind of buildings, or even other uses, but this is not in the context of this French chateau design. So somebody must have thought, oh, French, I'll just put something French, Google it. Well, there's no Google at the time. This looks like 1970s kind of thing. But, somebody put this on there, and there's many things wrong with this. Just the cornice work is all wrong. The roof's all wrong. Those double doors are wrong. The mixture of plaster and brick. It's just very poorly done. So you see on the right, a period building, and then on the left something that is not in the vernacular at all, even though I assume somebody was attempting to be. So now, this is not the main line, but these rails come out here to Elizabethtown. So this is where I am at now. I've been here 21 years, Elizabethtown College. This is an old railroad station. At one point, you could actually buy for $1, but you'd have to agree to raise $1 million at least to fix it up. And so I toyed with the idea, and my wife and I were thinking about opening a cafe here, actually buying this thing at the time. I'm glad we didn't, because a cafe nearby opened up on a corner, and it didn't last that long. People don't tend to hang around enough to want to eat. They're in a hurry. They just want to get on the train and go. If they're coming off the train, they just want to go home or go to the college or whatever. So the cafe didn't succeed. So I'm glad financially, market-wise, we didn't put a cafe in here. But and this is a picture of what it looked like before it was restored. I just noticed that. And this is what it looked like when I first moved here. You can see there's windows broken out and boarded up down the lower side, and the roof looks like it's not the original slate tiles, but it was renovated. So again, be inspired by something grand, scale down the reality, be loyal to style, quality, and detail. This is the third time saying this, but it's important now because I'm about to show you my own design. Conform to the environment, terrain, trees, climate, architectural vernacular. So this isn't a number of my lectures now, so I'm going to go kind of quickly through it because I don't want to be redundant, and it's going to be a little redundant because you're going to see reference to this in a number of my lectures. But so I bought this old farmhouse, 1877 farmhouse, and all the stuff that's projecting out, where you see the guy standing there, that's my father-in-law. That's all new. So a little over 1,500 square feet new. And inspired by childhood on the Philadelphia Main Line and trips to Europe. Here's a picture in Rome that I took. And I can't say that I was directly thinking of this when I did the other thing. I mean, there's Frank Lloyd Wright design like this too. And it's hard to nail down exactly what your inspiration is when you've lived a long time and you're doing things. And where did you get the idea for that? Maybe it's a brand new idea. Maybe it's a variation of an old idea. So this is before. You see there's no building jetting out to the left from the old house. So I made a foam model. This is what you used to do in the old days. I used balsa wood originally in the 1970s, part of a regional competition in the Northeast, and 3 statewide things that I entered when I was in high school. You had 3rd place. Would have won if I finished it, I think, but that's easy to say. You can judge for yourself. Show you that some other time. So anyway, foam models, and so there's both of these are presumably built at the same time. This little piece and the big piece, and they call the little part to the left a summer kitchen. There's a big walk-in fireplace that we've preserved. So now this is what I'm putting on to it. So here's one of the design choices. Here is a larger choice with a cutaway, so you can see furnishings and some facsimile of my wife and son at the time when I first made this model. My daughter hadn't been born yet. And so I have 3 major design choices. You see, one's just expanding the attic that's the first picture up on the right, and then the bottom two on the bottom are the other two designs, one bigger than the other. So I actually started building this first design before I even really decided what to do. I thought, I'll renovate the attic anyway, before I lifted the dormer up on the other side. And then as I was doing that, I realized that the headroom was a little too cramped, and also thermodynamic HVAC considerations for heating and cooling an attic space. So design choice 2, you can see both the interior and outside, and the views too that you'll see framing. And then design choice 3, the bigger design, and this is the one I chose. So this is what I'm building. Now this is a labor of love in a way. I intentionally have not subcontracted things. I've been involved in building projects, very large building projects all over the place during my lifetime. But this intentionally was just me and my son. A couple hours help from father-in-law digging in the dirt when he came visit, and a student once digging in the dirt. But we're building this. So this is the project. This is the little farm land I bought with almost 4 acres. Broke it into 2 parcels, and then I traded a farmer to maintain the one parcel where he can keep the crop, just grass, hay for his dairy farm. It's a 100-acre dairy farm on one side, well, 100 cows, over 100 acres, a 200-acre Amish farm just next to it, and then about a 100-acre other Amish farm on the other side of us. So about 5,000 man-hours of construction, plus a couple weeks total of some labor, father-in-law visiting on holidays, digging in the dirt, and a favorite student of mine went on to start his own company, Dax. Plus plenty of help from my son throughout his life, and ended up being our first individualized major in architecture at Elizabethtown College, just graduating in 2020. Now he's off to grad school. And painting by my daughter and Anna, and my wife Carla, and also plant a lot of plants. We put 220 trees with an irrigation system. My wife and I did that together. You can't really see that in this picture, maybe a little bit. Up on the horizon, just to the left of the garage up there, there's little tiny trees all around the perimeter, all around the property line with the irrigation system. The only thing contracted was the roof shingles, because it was becoming, I did most of the work in the summer times and breaks, and it was getting rushed, and I want to fall off the steep pitched roof, getting ready to start teaching again in the fall. And the concrete truck, because you always want a continuous pour of the concrete. It would have been several hundred bags, over 200, about 250 bags of concrete, and if I mixed that myself, there was no way I could mix it fast enough and have it dry as a continuous thing. And no employees. I've had a number of contracting projects and small businesses with employees. Not this. So before and after, and you get a feel for that. Just digest that for a second. It's quite a bit of work. Just me and my son, mostly very young, including like 4x8 sheets of plywood on the roof by myself, building all those eaves. And I didn't buy my scaffolding till near the end when I had to do the siding, and I realized there's no way I can do the siding up on ladders. But all the framing I did without scaffolding, a little tricky. In retrospect, I would have bought the scaffolding. In previous projects, I'd rent scaffolding, or we'd build temporary scaffolding, but I bought professional scaffolding to do the siding. So you get before and after here, you can see, with our yellow lab Henry in the picture. Sadly, he passed away, and now we have another puppy, yellow lab, Bear. So some of my sketches, preserving the original details. And just to mention these divisions, now these are not the most recent way the divisions, the AIA, American Institute of Architects, and the Construction Specifiers Institute, CSI, I've been involved with both those organizations in a number of ways over the years. These are the divisions, how we used to break them down. Now there's close to 50 because it's broken into a lot of subdivisions, subspecialties. And the building code. So now the International Building Code is what rules here, but I built to the Uniform Building Code and the BOCA Code, and in different parts of the country. So the building is designed for actually lateral loads and shear walls and earth to earthquake standards of California, because I did some structural specifying out there, and then I also lived in the Midwest. I was a professor at Purdue and witnessed the beginnings of tornadoes, and so I make it so that the whole building is tied down with tie downs, roof tie downs, hurricane clips, for tornadoes also. So it's designed pretty sturdy. And of course the foundation's below the frost line. So we dig a hole, diggity dig in the hole, put reinforced concrete steel, more than we needed, a little bit over design because dissimilar soils. I didn't step down the foundation. I didn't want stress concentrations. So, and I'm holding up the old building as well as building this new 2.5-story building. You see this foundation up against the old building here, helping hold it up. My son with a tape measure showing it's below the frost line. Otherwise, you get upheave. Concrete block, laid 440 something. Cornerstone, carved my son's name into that. Don't have a picture in this talk on that. Framing, this is the structure. See my daughter, born, and now she's going to college. Putting in a French drain, a perimeter drain. It's not technically a French, it's referred to as a French drain, but it's a perimeter drain to get the water away from the foundation. Start framing it up. A little bit oversizing. I designed for, when you do structural analysis, you have a choice of, there's a maximum deflection, but there's also failure analysis for shear and flexure and compression, and so and torsion, and so you design so it doesn't fail, certainly, but sometimes the deflection becomes a ruling thing, and not just the minimum by code, but because you don't want a perceived vibration. So I oversize things a little bit, not so much on the second floor, but on the first floor I oversized it because we have a parlor grand piano and could potentially have parties full of people dancing, or you don't want to feel the vibrations of your floor. So bring in all the wood, build a little table for my crosscut saw. You see my daughter there getting a little older. There's me down the corner almost 20 years ago now. Framing it all up. Model the barn too. That's become another project in itself that we've been working on recently. I made a porch out of that. Framing the views, that's a key thing to do. Frank Lloyd Wright's certainly known for doing that, but other people in the past too. If you have the luxury of designing your own and building your own building, you can tentatively pick where the windows go and then wait till it goes up and then frame it a little more specifically. So that's exactly what I did. And then I did this banding of windows. And, who knows what that's influenced by. Frank Lloyd Wright did that. Things in my youth I saw, Trumbauer and on those Tudor homes, predating a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright's work. So you can't say that Trumbauer was influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, because it's pretty much the same era of designs in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Actually, I don't know the exact date on the Trumbauer, but I think it probably predates Frank Lloyd Wright's. Frank Lloyd Wright was born in 1867, so I got to check on the dates. But the point is that this is a good thing to do, and a number of architects will do it over time. This is one of the bedrooms here, you can see. Framing that view. framing the views out the other directions. Some of the details for topics of other courses, like materials and methods and other things. The specifics of this kind of framing and comparing that to truss design. And it's a bit of work if you want nice overhangs and eaves. This is what I talked when I mentioned extending the gable ends. You see in the bottom left-hand corner here, how that gable end extends out. And you see the work it takes to do this. Well, you don't see it here. There's a rake, I'll show you in a second, that actually makes the gable end work. You kind of see it there. But the soffit's out the side. This is no trivial undertaking here of making the old and new fit together. Most developers nowadays will not want to even waste the time, in their opinion, to preserve the old. They'll just knock it down because the time it takes to match the old with the new is extremely time consuming. Nothing's plumb or square. It's just a lot of work. But I think it's worth it, preserving the old. So you can see here I'm trying to preserve the old as I'm building the new. Kept all this wood, reused a lot of it. There's the rake I was talking about in the upper right. That's what it takes to make a gable end. So now if you're doing trusses, you just pop it, you just lay out all the trusses. Comes in a big tractor trailer, a crane drops them up on your roof for you, just tilt them up. It's super easy and cheaper, but in my opinion, not worth the savings. I do teach lead in a number of my courses, and so this is just a reflection. I didn't do the lead analysis in the beginning. When I first made this in 2012, I'm doing a lead reflection. And so so you see the scaffolding here I've eventually purchased for about $500, but it's worth it. And I lend it to my neighbors all the time. Actually lent it to one guy that's helping. He was a little down in the dumps and financially, and I did a bunch of carpentry for free for him. Lent him my scaffolding, lent him my drywall lift, let him borrow my scaffolding, go to another state for a project. I don't mind that. Now here's some work by my daughter, and my wife did a similar thing next door. A lot of 2 months of labor just scraping down and several coats of paint. Very nicely done. This is my daughter's bedroom, which unfortunately she'll be leaving now to go to college in a week. My son's off to grad school. So before and after. In the barn now, that whole project on the left is a whole separate thing. I ended up knocking that shed part down on, you see the shed roof coming off the barn towards us, towards the camera, recently. It actually rotted over time, the snow load and everything. And I decided not to rebuild it, but then it opened up an outdoor porch. Wasn't sure whether or not to do that in the beginning. And beefed up the structure of the barn. You can see in another lecture. So, house, home, memories. So, our family project on our farm in Pennsylvania. This picture shows quite a bit. You see the new construction in the background, and then what I've done to the barn in the foreground. You can see our first yellow lab that lived here, Henry, in the foreground, and Bear, you don't see him. He wasn't born at this time. There's Joseph's on the right there on the picnic table building something, and you can see the chair that I sit in and look at the views, and the basketball, the little baby basketball on the left, and then the bigger one on the middle. So this tells a story, and you want your architecture to tell a story when you're presenting in a crit or to clients. It should be partly their story, or some combination of a story that they're hoping you'll tell with their story. And so there's certainly a story here of family, pets, and a project. And And if you want to see more here, I have now recently updated my portfolio. It's online, it's on YouTube. All this presentation now is going up on YouTube, and as well, has audio in it, so it's a PPTX file with audio embedded. There'll also be a PDF that you can get to with links and things. There's not a lot of links in here. So you can see some of the other projects I've had, and not all of them, but some highlights. When you put a portfolio and you put your face forward in front of people, you just want to pick some key things. And every one of these pictures has a story to it. And again, I left out a number of projects. Good number, actually. Big ones, too. So take a look at that if you like. If you're a student in my class, you should click on this link or go to the PDF and click on it if you're not in the PPTX. If you're on YouTube, look for the PDF down in the comments, click on that, find the link. The portfolio is also on YouTube, too. You can find it separately. And it is a PPTX in itself, the portfolio now, with audio embedded.